Summer Drive by Richard L. Elsliger. I am a professor of cognitive science at Rice University, a university situated in Houston, Texas. I make a respectable living, and to reflect my lifestyle, I bought a big black Mercedes as a reward, a rather ostentatious status symbol, but one that I coveted over the years and eventually acquired through my success and tenured promotion at the university. I am particularly fond of this Mercedes. She's my flagship, a road-going machine full of luxurious accoutrements befitting the four-door behemoth. June is upon us, and I administered the last exam before releasing my students, committing them to their summer fun. Houston is not known for its temperate climate, and I can say with reasonable certainty that today's heat stifled my every breath. I value my Mercedes, and Texas is known for melting car interiors, so when the temperatures rise, the windows of my Mercedes fall. The sun displayed its vengeful fury today, showing no mercy to any car that had its windows shut. A dashboard could warp in short order under such punishing conditions, and though I used a sunshade on the windshield, I still relished cool seats upon getting into my black cloaked battleship. The test takers finished early, and I collected the last test paper, wishing my students a great summer. I packed the tests away in my satchel and headed to my car with the hope that the seats wouldn't singe my legs getting in. Leaving the air-conditioned cocoon of my campus office introduced me to the Texas heat, and the air slapped me in the face with a rude hand as if my very presence on this planet was an affront to nature. The parking lot reflected vaporous squiggle lines rising from the black tar. I reached for the key fob to my Mercedes and felt its reassuring outline in my pants pocket. The outdoor heat formed perspiration on my brow, and I wiped it away with a handkerchief. I wanted out after many months of teaching. I needed a respite, and for that respite I chose a route already mapped in my mind, a premeditated escape from the city for a country drive. In years past, I always enjoyed piloting those wondrous meandering two-lane roads to nowhere, allowing my thoughts to ponder deeply upon life and rejoice in the natural topography of Texas. The door handle stung my hand, sizzling my fingers when I reached for it. I rubbed away the pain and got in. Even with the windows down, the heat of the interior was appreciable, though not intolerable. I started the car and rolled the windows up, turning on the AC to cool things down. Driving out of Houston proved less of an ordeal than I anticipated, and before long, I cleared the city limits and found myself on a pleasant two-lane road with less traffic and more opportunity to absorb the surrounding nature as my Mercedes and I carved our way through the landscape. I chose to drive to Hamilton Pool, an idyllic escape from the city. There I could soak in a natural water pool and enjoy the constant drip of an overhead waterfall, the place I deemed sheer heaven away from Houston. I got on the highway and decided to take the less crowded US 290. I squeezed the throttle and began eating distance, watching the odometer roll ever forward, clicking off miles in tandem with the increasing velocity registered by the speedometer. The Mercedes hummed along, its engine hitting a sweet spot, and the throaty rumble of my custom exhaust played a pleasant tune to my ears. The landscape moved past me like a motion picture, the beautiful desolation of rural Texas agreeable to my sensibilities. My heart sang with joy for the end of another academic year, with the promise of a good 2-month hiatus from doing anything of intellectual bent, my mind taking its long-deserved sabbatical. I turned on the radio for the news, and reports came forth presenting their usual din of catastrophic events. I suppose I could just have easily left the radio off and manufactured a speculative report of my own, telling lurid tales of car crashes, political disturbances somewhere in the world, a natural disaster or two, and incessant criminal activity in the Houston area, and I would sadly be correct. I let the radio play on, and it repeated those very things I conjured in my own mind with only the slightest of deviations from the script. One news item I did not anticipate pertained to an escapee from the Houston Zoo. The reporter stated that a black mamba had been reported missing from the zoo since this morning, the black mamba being one of Africa's most deadly snakes. I'd not seen a black mamba before, and the reporter stressed the lethality of this snake and if anyone had any news on its whereabouts, they were to contact the zoo at once and have a professional handler extricate the snake from its known location. I'd visited the zoo on occasion, as the Houston Zoo is located within a short distance from our Rice University. I hoped that they would find this snake, for I became concerned for the students still on campus. But what were the odds? I dismissed the notion that this snake could get to either the students or my office, or anywhere else on campus. It probably was already dead, run over by a car while crossing the road, no doubt. The sun began to set in the distance, a massive fireball in the sky while I drove west. I pushed up my sunglasses to check the trip odometer, noting that I put nearly 100 miles into my rear view already. I readjusted my sunglasses on my face to a more comfortable purchase when something caught my eye. I saw a momentary flash in the rear view mirror, and my eyes fixated on the reflection. The mirror reflected nothing back, the exception being an ever-vanishing road behind me. I retrained my eyes forward to the unfolding road ahead and the gorgeous setting sun. Again, from the furthest corner of my eye, I spotted movement in my rearview mirror, once more taking my attention away from the road. I checked again and saw nothing. I must have drawn a fly into the car when I left my windows down. I refocused on the road ahead. Yet again, I saw movement within the rearview mirror's surface, and this time, at 75 miles per hour, my eyes locked on to a gaping mouth staring at me through the reflection, a flat black cavern of death attached to a scaly, thick pipe of ivory-colored underbelly. It hissed at me and swayed side to side in the mirror. I saw a small hood on its neck that flared like a cobra's, and I knew I was in serious trouble. My mind worked in split seconds, attempting to make sense of such a fortuitous calamity of circumstance that allowed this cursed snake into my car, and my car alone. It all made sense now, as the news said that a black mamba had escaped from the Houston Zoo, and in fact the Houston Zoo was in close proximity to my university. It only took a slight turn of my head to provoke the strike, and it hit hard, sinking its fangs into my face, making multiple stabs at me with terrible bites, injecting large volumes of poison that invaded my very core. I could already feel the poison coursing beneath the epidermis of my right cheek, the pain excruciating. In an instant I realized in my panic that my right foot had hit the floor and the Mercedes was racing at wide open throttle. I quickly corrected, lifting off the throttle and applying the brake. I steered to the shoulder of the road and came to a panicked stop, fully cognizant that this thing was still in my car and I needed to get away from it as fast as I could. I opened my door and spilled out onto the pavement. I crawled away from my car on my forearms, feeling pins and needles in my face that traveled down my neck. I turned on my back and saw the thing, all 10 feet or more, leave my car and disappear like the crack of a bullwhip, headed toward the ditch and rapidly vanishing into the scrub brush. In agony, I crawled back to my car and got behind the wheel. I checked my mirrors again, looking for other cars that might help me, but saw none. The nearest hospital was many miles away, and attempting to explain my situation to a motorist was lost time I knew I did not have to squander. I put the Mercedes in gear and pulled back onto the road, doing a U-turn toward Houston, hitting the throttle hard. I watched my speed increase to ever higher integers until I was doing nearly 100 miles per hour. Even at 100 miles per hour, it would take me at least 1 hour to get to the hospital. I considered if I got pulled over by law enforcement, the traffic stop might prove a fatal mistake, so I conned myself and dropped back from the throttle to reach a speed fast enough to save me, but not fast enough to get me pulled over. I kept a vigilant eye for police cruisers and drove on. My blood boiled as if my face was on fire, and needles of pain shot down my arms while I attempted to hold the steering wheel steady. I thought to retrieve my phone and prepare the hospital for my situation and arrival, praying they would have the needed antidote on hand for a black mamba bite. I knew virtually nothing about black mambas and fretted over how much time I might really have before I died, or if indeed it was even worth the effort to save myself. I still had more years left in me. I had to try. I searched for my phone and remembered I placed it in my satchel with the term papers. I saw the satchel on the passenger floor and attempted to grasp it while I drove, but it remained just out of reach. I kept driving, not wanting to lose another moment of time. I knew about rattlesnake bites and aware they could really cause trouble, but rarely ended in fatality. Recalling the news, the reporter said the bite from a black mamba invariably killed. Did I stand a chance for survival? I calmed myself, trying to stabilize my heartbeat to prevent any faster spread of the venom. At my current speed, I soon caught up to traffic ahead, necessitating an illegal breach of the double yellow line to get by the slow movers. My maneuver was met with angry horns and flashing high beams. If only they knew. I began to salivate, and gobs of spittle began to flow uncontrollably from my mouth. I drew the sleeve of my shirt across my chin, attempting to abate this embarrassing side effect. I drove on. My mind started to drift to unconnected things from my past, my childhood spent without a care in the world, then my high school days, and later my time as a student at university. A crushing headache crept in during these thoughts, and I put a palm to my forehead from the pain. My eyes ached to the point they felt as if they might burst apart, spilling aqueous humor onto my shirt. I drove on. Objects in the distance assumed a blurry connotation about them, and I observed that some of these objects appeared doubly to my eroding vision. I disciplined myself, telling my mind that it was an illusion, and to disregard it, for if I didn't get to a hospital soon, these effects might overtake me and I would be doomed. I checked my face in the rearview mirror and saw my eyelids drooping. I drove on. Ice-cold sensations invaded my hands and feet, and tingling electrical storms of immense discomfort ran up and down my legs. I passed a road sign that said 50 miles to Houston. In an ill-conceived moment of levity, I said to myself that Houston, I have a problem. My spirits lifted by the silly comment, I drove on and squeezed the throttle more. Droplets of perspiration dotted my forehead, and the back of my tongue felt distinctly numb. I began to retch and ejected vile contents from my mouth that spilled out over my legs and stained the driver's seat. It angered me, this disrespectful display, and how it violated my Mercedes in the most disgraceful of ways. Over the years of ownership, I had maintained this car with the utmost and meticulous application of care, and now this violent outburst from my mouth demanded I regain better control of myself. I readjusted my focus to ensure I did not elevate my heart rate. Severe, mind-numbing pangs entered my abdomen, inducing me to retch even more until I could expectorate no more. I drove on. I passed a road sign that read 25 miles to Houston. The road had evolved to a 4-lane by this point, and it facilitated my ability to pass the slower traffic. My breathing was labored, and my heart began to beat with an erratic thump in my chest. Systems were shutting down, and I knew it. I was terrified of the rapid and progressive spiral downward, and some of the worst fears pervaded my deepest thoughts. I attempted to banish such negativities from my mind, but they were relentless and crept back in, adding to the roiling fear that I might actually die. It is a difficult thing to come to terms with one's own death, and it never really goes well, though many put on brave faces at the end. I believe we all transition toward a state of terror as the end nears, depending, of course, whether the death is instant and unexpected, or lingering as it would appear to be in my current wretched state. I breached the city limits and traffic thickened to a standstill. I took aim at the nearest off-ramp and guided the Mercedes to less traveled roads, navigating a zigzag pattern to get me to the hospital unimpeded. My body was reeling now and my time extremely limited. When you are dying, your body tends to know it and the mind tends to deny it. I was past the point of denial, and I started running red lights to get me to the hospital entrance. I drove on. I made one more turn, and there stood the hospital in all its grandeur and ubiquity. I never thought I would see a more beautiful sight. I hit the gas and guided the Mercedes toward the emergency patient drop-off point. I crashed into a pillar, my leg too weak to hit the brake, and I came to a rest with a jarring halt. I undid my seatbelt, opened my door, and fell out onto my back. I heard loud voices, disturbances no doubt from my hard impact with the pillar. My eyes looked skyward to the fading light of day as everything turned toward the blackness of night. I took one last conscious breath and...